After the releases of Ace Combat X and X2, Bandai Namco Games wasn't planning to slow down on the handheld releases anytime soon. They gave Access Games the go-ahead on another title, but this time around, it wouldn't be made for the PSP like the last couple were. This is because Nintendo's new 3DS handheld had just recently come out and had a little more horsepower behind it than Sony's PSP did. So not only would the next handheld Ace Combat game be developed for the 3DS, but it wouldn't be an entirely original game either, with Access Games instead choosing to remake Ace Combat 2. So how would the new tech allow Access Games to improve the handheld Ace Combat titles, and how would they go about improving upon the original AC2? Well, let's talk about it. And before getting too far into the video, I should mention that this is the 12th in a series of videos where I'm playing every Ace Combat game for the first time and reviewing them as I go along. And while you don't have to have seen the rest of the videos in order to enjoy this one, you will be missing a lot of important context about my journey with the series if you haven't seen them, so I'll have the full playlist linked in the description below for those of you that want to go check those out first. But with that out of the way, Ace Combat 3D Cross Rumble is a combat flight simulation game developed by Access Games and published by Bandai Namco Games for the Nintendo 3DS in 2011. And right off the bat, let's clarify something about the game's title. In the American and European releases of the game, this was actually titled Ace Combat Assault Horizon Legacy, making it almost seem as if this is some sort of handheld port of Ace Combat Assault Horizon specifically. But in Japan, the game is known as Ace Combat 3D Cross Rumble, which makes it much more clear that this is actually an original game developed for the 3DS. So for the sake of this video, and I guess for the review series as a whole, I'm going to be referring to the game as Cross Rumble, as that's the original title given to it by the development team, and frankly, it's also just less confusing than calling it Assault Horizon Legacy. And as I mentioned in the intro, this original game is actually a remake of Ace Combat 2. So even though I always say that you don't have to have seen my other videos, I do highly recommend that you watch my original Ace Combat 2 review before watching this one, as I'm going to be comparing Cross Rumble to the original quite a bit throughout the video. But as far as the core gameplay goes, the game once again runs on the modified Ace Combat 4 engine used in X and X2. More specifically, they've basically just pulled the core gameplay and systems straight over from Joint Assault, with some small changes being made. The flight model feels about on par with Joint Assault early on in the game, still having that weird, kind of slow and clunky feel, but the later planes in this game actually feel a lot smoother here than they did in Joint Assault. So for the first half of the game, you'll have a similarly clunky feel to the flight controls, but once you get some of the better planes unlocked, things actually start to feel pretty damn good here. And a lot of other positives from Joint Assault have come over too. Things like the extensive part customization being available for all planes in the game, the large variety of planes available to players, even including things like World War II fighters, and an insane amount of unlocks available for meeting certain criteria, adding a ton of replayability for those that love to unlock everything the game has to offer. And this even includes the return of the military rank system from AC2, which instead of meaning nothing now, is actually used to unlock new parts to customize your aircraft with. This all means that much like Joint Assault, the core gameplay and systems are a bit of a mixed bag here, but there's more positives than negatives on offer. And in terms of presentation, the game does look slightly better than the PSP titles, but it's pretty hard to tell due to the game being played on such a small screen. Things like texture quality have definitely been improved, but I wouldn't say that it's a significant improvement over X and X2 in terms of visuals on the whole. Again, this could just be because the 3DS screens are pretty small, making it harder for me to pick up on more subtle details, but we'll see if my opinion changes when I get to editing the video and scaling up the footage. One weird thing about the presentation in this game though, is that there are a bunch of new post-processing effects that are visible in the third-person view, and these weirdly make the game feel slower and more sluggish than it actually is. If you play in the HUD or cockpit view, Cross Rumble actually has some surprisingly fast gameplay for a handheld title, but something about these extra effects like the heat coming off of your afterburners make the game feel like it's slower than it actually is. And something to make a quick note of here is that the wild swinging from side to side that was present in Joint Assault's third-person view has been dialed back a lot here, so thankfully I didn't have the same motion sickness problem when playing this game in third person. And another weird issue is actually one that's returning from way back in Ace Combat X, and that's the incredibly poor audio quality. I'm assuming that this is due to them needing to compress the audio files to be able to fit everything the game has to offer onto one of those small 3DS cartridges, as if you don't know, the game cartridges for the original 3DS that this was released on had a hard limit of 2 GB of storage. It should also be factored in that the game was only really meant to be heard through the 3DS's built-in speakers and not through headphones, but when I played through this game with headphones for the sake of this video, it was like an assault on my ears the entire time. Despite the low audio quality though, the soundtrack in this game is pretty awesome. It reuses a lot of the best tracks from Joint Assault, but it also has a bunch of original tracks that are really damn good. These new tracks cover pretty much every different sound that the Ace Combat franchise has had up to this point, from the rock sound of Air Combat and AC2, to the techno sound of AC3, to the orchestral style of the PS2 trilogy. Here, take a quick listen and see what you think. And as good as this soundtrack is, I think that I would have enjoyed it way more if they had re-recorded or simply just reused the Ace Combat 2 soundtrack for the remake. And I know that I never talked about the music of AC2 in my review of it way back when, simply because I hadn't had the thought to showcase the soundtracks yet at that point in the series. So in an attempt to prove my point, let's right that wrong here. I'm going to show you those same gameplay clips that I just used, but with Ace Combat 2 music put over them instead, and I would love to hear which soundtrack you guys prefer in the comments. Let's take a look. But with all the basic stuff out of the way, let's talk about the things that are more unique to Cross Rumble. To start, the campaign is a near one-to-one recreation of the original Ace Combat 2 campaign. You'll be doing the same missions in the same order as you would in the original, but there have been some extra objectives or story bits added to some of these to better flesh out the experience and make it feel more comparable to what Ace Combat has become since its early days. This is especially true in the story department, where they haven't added a ton to it, but they've recontextualized everything to fit Ace Combat 2 canonically into the Strange Reel universe. The original AC2 never took place in the real world, but it didn't take place in Strange Reel either, as the concept of Strange Reel didn't come around until Ace Combat 4. Because of this, Access Games has taken the opportunity to fit Ace Combat 2's events into the broader lore of Strange Reel, and it's really cool to see for someone like me who still considers AC2 to be one of their favorite Ace Combat games. Along with this, the two wingmen from AC2, Slash and Edge, of course make a return here. And this time, rather than just being two superficially different options, the characters now have actual dialogue and voice acting. I found both of them to be very likable characters in this game too, though I have to admit I didn't bring Edge out on many missions because of how attached I became to Slash after just the first couple times I flew alongside him.
I used to want to be a real ace once too, but I didn't stand a chance. Made me realize I'm still just a kid. Might be why I still call him Pops.
Taking a trip down memory lane?
But now, I feel like I can actually win something this time. It's an honor flying beside you.
And getting back to the gameplay, I said earlier that it pretty much plays identically to Joint Assault, and that's true, but there are some mechanics here that distinguish Cross Rumble's gameplay from anything else in the franchise. The biggest of these is the addition of attack and evasive maneuvers. These are basically DFM and reversals from Assault Horizon, but they've been integrated in a way that feels much more in line with traditional Ace Combat gameplay. The attack maneuver takes DFM's place, and instead of it simply being activated by getting behind your enemy and pressing a button, you now have to stay within close range of your enemy for a good 10 seconds or so before being able to activate it. And when you do use the attack maneuver, it doesn't fully lock you onto the enemy like DFM does, it instead just positions you behind them for a clean shot, but it doesn't guarantee that you'll be tracking them for any amount of time, with there being plenty of instances where the enemy pulled away from me pretty much right as my maneuver got me into position. So rather than being a guaranteed kill, it's a chance to kill, and with it taking more effort to activate, I find this to be a much better implementation of a DFM-like mechanic. The evasive maneuvers, however, are more of their own thing entirely. When a missile is tracking you, you'll have a very short window before the missile impacts to flick the control stick in the direction indicated by the HUD and press the Y button to quickly evade the missile. During intense dogfights, it can actually be incredibly tricky to get these evasive maneuvers to work in such a short amount of time, given the pressure you'll already be under, but it feels incredibly satisfying to actually get one and be rewarded for it by completely avoiding the damage. And if an enemy is positioned close behind you when you dodge their missile, you'll also slam on the brakes really quickly while you're evading, putting you behind them for a quick counterattack. So again, I feel like they took the existing mechanic from Assault Horizon and just repurposed it to make it flow more naturally with the traditional Ace Combat gameplay, and it feels really good in my opinion. Something that is really awkward here though is the lack of a full map button. In every single Ace Combat game up to this point, you've been able to press or hold a button on the controller to expand the map, giving you more info about where to go outside of what's in your immediate vicinity. However, Cross Rumble completely lacks any such feature, seemingly due to how the screens have been split up here. Due to the 3DS having two screens on the top and bottom of the system, the designers at Access Games decided to put the gameplay and the very basic HUD on the top screen, and put other things like the radar, ammo counts, and subtitles all on the bottom. Because of this, they couldn't have expanded the size of the radar outright, but I definitely feel like there should have been some way to zoom it out to be able to get a better idea of what direction I should be moving in throughout the mission. I found myself pretty much just relying on the indicator for the nearest enemy to know where to go at any given time, and it really felt like I was just flying from one target to another mindlessly, so having more info definitely could have made the missions feel a lot smoother here. But another positive in terms of gameplay here is that they've added a ton of new Ace squadrons to the campaign that feel like they've been pulled straight out of Ace Combat Zero. These Ace squadrons will show up in the middle of a mission, being introduced with a cutscene that's incredibly reminiscent of Zero, and they all have unique dialogue, voice actors, and even character portraits to differentiate them from one another. I loved the Ace squadrons of AC0 back when I played it, so of course I loved seeing them bring the idea into something new after seemingly forgetting about the concept for so many games. And along with these, they've also added some extra fanfare and lore to the ZOE or Zoe fighters that were present in the original AC2. Back in the original, they would just appear from time to time during a mission, acting just like any other Ace pilot would, but here, the mystery of the Zoe fighters is played up throughout the entirety of the campaign, with questions being raised about how they seemingly become more and more capable pilots every time we see them, and who the pilots even are, as they don't seem to be affiliated with any military power. There's a great sense of build-up with these guys throughout the game, and the best part is, none of the questions raised about them are ever answered in the end, leaving us to wonder who the hell these Crimson Red fighters actually are. It makes these guys infinitely more interesting than they were in the original, and it's a great way to recreate some of the most memorable enemies from it. And while we're on the topic of revisiting the most memorable parts of AC2, can I just take a minute to say that it was really fun to replay a lot of these missions again. Ace Combat 2 is one of the games in the series that I have the most nostalgia towards, as it was the first time during this review series that I really felt like the franchise had figured out what it was supposed to be, so being able to replay a bunch of those really unique missions I remembered was awesome. That mission where you dip in and out of the ravines to destroy the missile silos, flying above the clouds to shoot down some SR-71s, it was just so fun to re-experience some of my earliest Ace Combat memories in a new game. And because this is a remake of AC2, the missions are once again bite-sized the way they were pre-AC4, only taking 5 to 10 minutes from beginning to end. And look, I'm all for having these long, epic, multi-staged missions that some of the newer entries have, but there's such a simple fun factor to these short PS1 style missions. Rather than having the objective change every few minutes, the objective, the setting, the plane you're flying, the enemies you're up against, everything changes every few minutes or so, making it way easier to fall into that addicting flow of just going from one mission to another. I don't think that the newer games need to go back to this mission length and style by any means, but like I said, there's just such a simple fun to these little bite-sized bits of action, and it was really nice to revisit that style of game again. And speaking of bite-sized, the game is only about 4 hours long from beginning to end, which makes perfect sense given that's about how long the original AC2 is. It's a game that you could boot up and play the entire way through in an afternoon if you wanted to, and while some players might want a little more meat on the bone in their Ace Combat games, I also think that makes games like AC2 and Cross Rumble a lot easier to revisit since it's such a small commitment compared to games like AC4 and onwards. And you guys, that's about all I have to say about Ace Combat 3D Cross Rumble. I know that this review was a bit shorter than a lot of my recent stuff, but like I said, it's a short game to begin with, and when you factor in that it's a remake of a game that I've already reviewed, there's really only so much I can say. But before I get to my final thoughts, there's something that I have to address real quick when it comes to the series as a whole. We've obviously been reviewing the games in release order, and after this one, the free-to-play Ace Combat Infinity is up next on the list. However, with the servers having been shut down years ago, it is, at the time of making this video, completely impossible to play the game in any way, shape, or form. So unfortunately, we're gonna have to skip that one and go straight to Ace Combat 7 from here, but just know that if Infinity ever ends up being playable again, I fully plan on going back to play it for myself and cover it in a video. But overall, I enjoyed Ace Combat 3D Cross Rumble for what it is. It's a nice short revisit to one of my personal favorite Ace Combat games, and it even introduces some unique mechanics that I found to be pretty enjoyable. However, the game is definitely held back by some of the fundamental flaws that came over from Joint Assault, and there's a part of me that can't help but wish that we had gotten a more proper AC2 remake for home consoles and PC over this. I think that what's here is perfectly fine, but it really does leave me wishing that more had been done, especially considering that as it currently stands, this is the one and only time an Ace Combat game has ever gotten a remake. When I remove my AC2 nostalgia from the equation, this really is just a marginally better Joint Assault, and while I enjoy a lot of the additions here, I am left feeling that the original Ace Combat 2 is still a much cleaner and more enjoyable experience overall. So at the end of the day, I'm going to give Ace Combat 3D Cross Rumble a 7.2. What's up, guys? Thanks for sticking around. I'm once again going to be pinning the poll for the next review series in the comments, and this is the last time I'm going to be promoting it in an Ace Combat review, so if you haven't voted yet and you'd like to let me know what you would want to see next here on the channel, make sure to go check that out. Remember that you can check as many boxes as you want, so rather than just choosing your favorite out of the list, just check the box for anything you'd like to see me cover. If you want to dive deeper into my Ace Combat series, click on the playlist right here. And if you want to support more videos like this one, check out my Patreon page where you can get access to these videos early, as well as get updates on how they're coming along. Anyway, thanks guys, and I'll hope to see all of you right back here for the next Ace Combat review.